Well, good afternoon from Endless Studios. I am your, I guess, head of Endless Studios. We'll go with that. I'm Brian, and I am joined today by our two project organizers, our project leaders for the Feisty Ferrets project, Kaela and Natalie. Kaela, you are new to Endless Studios this summer. I would ask you maybe to just say a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Hi, I am Kayla. Nice to meet all of you. I'm currently in a program for video game design at SMU Guildhall, and my specialization is in programming. So I'm doing a lot of work with Unity and Unreal and making my own engine. And I've made a few games in the past during my undergrad, which was a undergrad in game and simulation development. And I'm super passionate about making games that are fun and engaging for players like you. So nice to meet all of you.
Awesome. And also joining us today is Natalie. Now, Natalie, you are not new to Endless Studios. You are back
No.
for but we're nonetheless enthusiastic to have you here.
Well, that's a relief.
So you're back. Actually, Natalie, we need to talk to you. No, I'm just kidding. So we are super excited to have you back. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to, Brian. So I've been with Endless Studios for quite a while now, taught versions of this in person, believe it or not, back in the dark ages when we still did such things. And have also run programs online, collaborating with Brian in various summers leading up to this one. And my background is in writing. So I focus on the world building, storytelling, and narrative design side of things when I make games on my own. I love the indie game making style. So I love art games. I love just kind of throwing something together. I love collaboration, and I love to teach. So I bring a lot of teaching experience to the plate here, which is, of course, why I'm involved in a place like Endless Studios, where folks like you guys out there can come and not just do game making, but also learn game making. So I'll be supporting as your instructor to help you figure out what you need to know and how to know it. As we work on this awesome project, Feisty Ferrets. But, you know, I feel like it's like we're talking about this idea of a game, and we've mentioned the title, but I mean, let's get a little bit of a big picture look before we delve into the game. And like, what are we going to be doing this summer, Brian?
Yes, I think it's probably worth talking about because it's a little different from what we've done in the past. And this is I'll preface it by saying this is a bit of an experiment when we're piloting some new things, but we think it's cool. So here's the high level overview. You know, we've been making games for a while. We've been helping young people learn to make games for a while. You can do that in a way that feels a lot like a classroom. You can do that in a way that, you know, feels a lot like everybody has their individual project where they follow a recipe and they're making some things. We thought, let's try doing it in a way where we're actually making real game projects. So we are working with pros, you know, industry pros like Kaela, to come up with project concepts that we think would be genuinely fun game ideas. And Kaela will talk a little bit about her concept as we go through, but that we thought would be genuinely fun game ideas where there would be an opportunity to learn and for young people who are learning to make games to get involved. Now, we're not expecting anybody who's going to get involved to, you know, on the participant side to be a experienced game maker. We're not necessarily expecting you to, know how to code or know how to program or know how to make digital art or anything like that. We're just expecting that, you know, hopefully you're enthusiastic to be here. And we found opportunities on the project where we'd like to loop you in, and you have an opportunity to take on what we call tasks on the project. So these are opportunities to do something, to make something that folks like Kaela and Natalie have curated for you. And if you're being asked to do something, we'll give you some resources to help you learn it, but you'll be contributing to the real project and ultimately helping us move forward to building a game that will eventually be released. And we'll talk a bit about our aspirations for that as well. So we'll talk more in this video about the details of that. If you get involved with us, which you can, you know, if you are already signed up to participate in the beta, welcome. And if you're not, you can check out studios.theendlessmission.com and sign up for your invite to the beta if all of that sounds cool and you'd like to participate. We'd love to have you. We're sort of inviting folks in on a rolling basis. But we'll talk more about the details of this project and what we'll be doing as we go through today. So let's get started doing that. So Kaela, can you talk a little bit about the creative concept of, Feisty Ferrets? Where the idea came from, what kind of game it is, if folks are thinking about, well, why might I want to get involved? I like these kinds of games myself. These are the kind of games I play. These are the kind of games I think it would be interesting to give us a sense of what Feisty Ferrets is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as has been said, the title is Feisty Ferrets, and you can probably imagine that there are ferrets involved, and they are very wiggly, mischievous little creatures. So, you are going to be playing as a ferret, and your goal as this ferret is to escape your cage and avoid the humans. And you'll be in this cage, and there will be lots of toys that you can play with and obstacles that you can climb over. So the genre is going to be a puzzle platformer. You'll be doing mostly platforming where you jump up onto things and go through things. You can think of games like the classic Spyro is similar in the playstyle sense. You can think of Slime Rancher for the kind of whimsical aesthetic and the bright colors. If you've ever played Untitled Goose Game, that was really popular last year. Very chaotic. We want that chaotic energy in our game. And as for the actual feel of the game, we're still kind of in the air, and we'll show you that later on what the player controller will really feel like, and we'll talk about what that means as well. But you can think about Snake Pass as our basis for this kind of silly physics, goofy, wiggling around little guy in the world. So I don't really know where I got the idea from. I think I was just thinking of cute animals, and what's a cute animal that not anyone really talks about? Oh, ferrets. Those are fun. They're cute.
Like, ferrets haven't been done yet. Let's do ferrets.
Exactly.
I like it too. You described it a little bit, to Kaela, where such an important part of game design, especially for a game like a platformer, is feel and what it feels like, how your avatar, moves. And as we'll get into the project, I imagine one of the things you'll be doing is really working on that what you call the player controller, which is sort of the interface of how you operate the avatar in a game.
Yes.
And getting the feel of that right is often a key part of developing a game like a platformer, and having a good idea for it. And that's why I thought the idea of a ferret when you were pitching it was so interesting, because as you say, Natalie, it hasn't been done before that I can think of it in a game. And ferrets just move in an interesting way, right? They're slinky, it's sort of like the front half doesn't know what the back half is doing. It seems like half the time. And so I think trying to capture the feel of that in our design, and then actually implementing that to make that work in the game is going to be really cool. So I'm excited to see how that goes. I talked about in my little intro what are, that we had goals around releasing our projects. What are the goals, Kaela? What are your release aspirations for Feisty Ferrets? What are we working towards as we contribute to the project?
Yeah, well, I think the very end goal would be to publish on something like Itch, where you can just have people go and download it, because there's nothing cooler in the world than saying, oh, I worked on a game. You can go play it. That's just awesome to be able to tell people. The shorter term goals are really just you to be able to learn and figure out if you really like working on games and if it's something that you'd want to contribute to in a longer term fashion. So we're going to be running sprints, they're called. But you can just think of them as short timelines with specific types of tasks involved. So we won't always be running the same kinds of tasks that Brian mentioned you'll be able to sign up for. And your mini goals in each sprint are just to look at these tasks and say, am I interested in contributing to them? And if so, which ones would I like to do? And then they'll rotate out and you can have new choices.
Go ahead,
I
Alan.
have a goal too.
Yeah.
As a sort of instructional side to this. I love the idea of releasing a project on Itch or wherever else you could make it available to the public that isn't just acceptable, but is actually delightful. And with the idea of Feisty Ferrets, I love the idea of every member of the team who joins the project in whatever capacity or contribution being able to share it with their friends, and having your friends play it and say, that was really fun. I loved that. And for me, that's what makes this different from maybe a more traditional game making project you would do in a classroom. It's really a project where you're making a real game where the goal is fun. And while you're making something where you're targeting this great gameplay feel to the player controller, really engaging puzzle platforming, you also happen to be learning. So my goal is that we reach an endpoint with this where folks who are not studying game making and are maybe even newcomers to games could hop in and play it and be delighted.
So let's explore both sides of that a little bit, because Natalie, you've described just now some of the learning goals and what we hope folks can take away from. We'll talk about that in more detail. Kaela, you started to describe some details of the development process of making a game, and you were using terminology that is the terminology we use when we make professional game, like sprints, right? So I think that that's just as a piece of commentary. I think one thing we very much want to expose folks to as they participate in Endless Studios is the real way we do stuff in the industry. So we're going to use terms like sprints. We're going to have things like sprints. We're not just going to use the words, I guess. And you'll see really how a game gets made. And I think, Kaela, you've built that in a bit into the structure of the kind of milestones we'll have on the project. There's another term like that. So can you talk a little bit about what we're starting with in this project, what we'll sort of have at the beginning as participants get involved, and how you're structuring things, how we're going from what we have at the beginning to a game ultimately over time that we'll want to release on, let's say, itch.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our very first milestone/sprint, the goal is really just to get an idea of what exactly this game is and what it's going to look like. So we've created some assets already, and they're still in the progress of being built out into example levels for you guys. But first and foremost, we want you to know this is what a Feisty Ferret is going to feel like and what it's going to be like to play this game at the end. So to do that, we're going to have some creative brainstorming sessions and some discussions of different games of the same type, where we can think about these are the mechanics that are frequently used in puzzle platformers. This is what it means to be a puzzle platformer and things like that. It's really just getting us all to see the same game in our mind's eye. And then once we have that figured out and we're all on the same page, we're going to move on to actually starting to create things. How exciting. So again, we have a set of initial assets that you'll be able to use, and we're going to be using Unity for this project, the most recent version. So you'll go into there and you'll pull different kinds of tasks that are, for example, level designing or thinking of a new mechanic, and we'll help you and guide you through the process of actually implementing that. And as we get more and more levels that are built, we'll be playtesting them in the next version of a sprint, and figuring out, okay, which ones feel good? How do we expand on this? And that's really the process of game making. You see what feels good, you find the fun, and you iterate on that. So speaking of iteration, we're going to be doing a more cyclical fashion than a usual game development studio would. So typically there are deadlines in game development studios, and you really have a hard cutoff. And I'm sure as people who like games, you've seen what happens when people are like, okay, this was our deadline, but we're going to push it back. People don't like that. But we're going to avoid that by building in a cyclical structure, because we don't know, what people will want to work on in this game. We don't know the timeline for it, and we're not worried about it. We just want it to be fun. So we're going to have these development sprints where you're making things and then playtesting, and we're just going to kind of ping pong back and forth between those until we're like, okay, we have enough to make a shippable, fully polished game. So that's the last part. You see everything that you've collected in your time working on this project, and you make it absolutely perfect and something that you would be proud of your friends to play, which means it's going to be delightful, as Natalie said. And once you're at that stage, you ship it. That's the final goal.
I wanted to add on a couple of things there, again, as your instructor. And just to translate to plain English, in case there are any folks listening out there, the word sprint, that is a block of time. So when we say sprint, we're thinking of a length of time that we have to do a thing. And we name sprints differently depending on the kinds of things we're trying to do in that chunk of time. So when Kaela says development sprint, we're taking, say, 2 weeks. That could be the length of our sprint to do development. And we'll start the project with what we're calling a creation sprint, which is our time to all learn about the genre of puzzle platforming, get on the same page as a team, and this is one of the most exciting things about joining Endless Studios and working on projects with us, helping you figure out which tasks you want to do. So this is not a class, which means we will not be giving you assignments. In fact, you can choose the task that you want to work on. And that's incredibly exciting because you can deploy your interests and any knowledge you already bring to the table to work on the project and contribute. Now, once you take a task and you say, yes, I do want to work on level design, or I even want to get into a little programming, we're going to have some expectations now that you've told us that you're ready and excited to work on that dimension of the project. But there's nothing that we're going to force you to do. In fact, you're invited to listen in, keep an eye on the project as an outsider, and then join the team when you feel ready. Because it's cyclical, you'll have several opportunities to dive in and make a contribution. So it's on your timeline. We'll make these opportunities available to you, and we want everyone to be involved. So all are invited on your timeline and according to your interests to get started, and then we'll help you get over the finish line.
Yeah, just a couple of comments as you guys were talking about that. So one is, Kaela, you mentioned the circumstance of, well, nobody likes to see a game get delayed, and nobody likes to see a game get delayed. But the reality is the process that we're following here, even though in fairness, it's probably a little looser than what a lot of professional game studios would do, it's not so unusual. And you used another phrase that I thought was super important, which was finding the fun, right? It's very common when professional game making teams do what they do even on big titles, that they'll start by a phase that's all about doing a lot of research and getting inspiration and seeing other, and playing and talking about and thinking about other relevant games in the same genre or games that might be an inspiration in one way or the other. It's very common, to then spend a bunch of time testing and prototyping and not really working on building out the final mature game yet, but trying to find that it's fun, right? If we're talking about the player controller again, making sure that it just feels really fun to move the ferret around, deciding what kind of things a ferret should be able to do. And you use that word iterative, right? Doing it over and over again and improving, and you use the word cyclical because when you iterate, you're working in a cycle. And I think doing that, and as game makers, we just sort of know when we found the fun, and when there's like enough there, the ferret can do enough things, right? We have enough levels that showcase them. And now we're going to switch from building new stuff to, you said making it perfect, and a term we often use there is polishing, right? Really, really getting it to be super spiffy and cool, and have everything come together. And then when you've got that, you can release it. So it's not, working in those sprints that are organized around that progression, I think is a pretty reasonable way to work. And I think we don't exactly know what the date will be when we reach the finish line, but we're going to know as we get there, and we'll know more. And I think that's one of the fun things about the process. Now, Natalie, you kind of gave an overview of the approach we're taking learning wise, which is great. Let's say I'm someone who's relatively new to game making. Maybe I've, experimented a little bit. Maybe I've, maybe I know a little bit of coding, whether making games or, some other kind of coding. What kind of things could I learn if I wanted to maximally participate in this project? What kind of tasks will there be, that I could, and what could I take away from those?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brian. So of course, the first thing any game maker at any level needs to do is kind of bond with the project. So finding your motivation and understanding why you think this game is worth working on. And there are going to be tasks that let you do that by, again, like we were saying, learning about the genre, learning about other games that are similar to this one, playing those, thinking about them in maybe a deeper way than you would if you were a player. So everything you do here is really going to let you into this process the way you work on games when you're on a real game making team. So, at the outset, we've got these tasks that are open to everybody to switch your mindset over from player to really being a game maker and thinking the way game makers, game designers, game developers think about video games. Now, as we move out of the creation sprint and into the development, you're going to have some different directions you could go in. And, folks could do everything if they have the time, and you're invited to try. But you are going to have the opportunity to really work into some game design by building a level, which I'm excited about because there could be nothing cuter than like learning to make levels and think about environment design, puzzle design, level design in the cage of a ferret. So thank you, Kaela, for an amazing high concept.
You're so welcome.
It's a dream to work with you. So you've got game design there, and we've also got a task surrounding audio design, which I really made a point of asking for this because I am secretly just in such constant, unwavering admiration of audio designers and sound designers and what they contribute to games. So if you're interested in audio, you can actually spec into audio design in this project and help give us background music and sound effects, which we will need lots of. And then I think one of the coolest things about this project is because we have a lead on the project who is has a programming focus, we are going to be offering the opportunity to get into some coding on Feisty Ferrets and actually work on coding up some mechanics. And Kaela, I'll hand it off to you to talk a little bit about what you're looking for those who are really interested in digging into the engineering side.
Yeah, sure. So starting off, some of the mechanics that we have already, and we'll show a little bit, you're able to run around in the cage, of course. You're able to jump. There are some obstacles that are bouncy, so you can kind of get a boost up in the air, and you're able to push things. There are these little balls that you can roll around, and eventually we would like things to trigger if you have a ball roll over something and it does something special. And those are the basic set of mechanics, but I'm sure you can imagine already that there's a lot of room for more mechanics. So what I'd really like to see is people who are interested in programming, and even if you just want to think up a concept for a mechanic, to really dive deep into other games of the genre and really play test this a lot, see what you think feels fun, and tell me what kind of mechanics you would like to see in the game. And we can, once you've created that, if you're interested in programming it, then you can give it a shot. And of course, I will guide you in the best way that I can. Or you can hand it off and say, okay, I think somebody else should make this now. And if anyone else is interested, they can take that on. So I think this gives you a lot of creative control over where exactly this project goes. And I think that's really cool. Just having that leeway of what do you want the ferret to do? Let's talk about it. Let's see how we can engineer that.
I love it.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Natalie.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to tack something on there, which I was going to hand it back to you, Brian, anyway. I wanted to ask you to maybe step in and bring your also expert game making knowledge and give us a little bit of a clue as to what is a mechanic.
It's like we have one mind between the two of us now. Because I was going to throw the same question to you, but you beat me to it. So yeah, just for I guess for the benefit of folks who maybe are new to game making and have not heard that term before. So a mechanic is something you do in a game. We often describe them as the verbs of a game. And so if you think about, a game that you like to play, you like a platformer, right? You can think of the mechanics of the things you do in a platformer. You run, you jump, maybe you evade enemies, maybe you attack enemies, maybe you collect things or earn points, right? And Natalie and I, and Kaela, I'm sure you too, could probably do like a 3-hour stream, just on different philosophies of game design, there are folks who are very narratively focused in their game design. Personally, I'm a very mechanically focused designer, either when I'm doing game design or when I as a leader of a game team, I'm working with folks who are doing game design. I tend to think that, because games are interactive, you start with the mechanics and you think about what you want the experience to be and what players are trying to do, and you sort of push to find those good, engaging, active verbs and then tune around them for your mechanics. And I think one of the interesting things about this project, as Kaela said, is we don't exactly know what the mechanics are all going to be. Going in, we've got some things to start with, and we're going to expand upon that. And that's certainly one of the things you'll be able to influence as a participant in the project. And just to make one more quick comment on that too, it was very important for us as we designed these projects that folks who are participating have opportunities like that to influence the direction of the project. So we don't know what all the mechanics are, but you can help figure those out. If you have an innovative idea for something and you want to do a design, and pitch that to the rest of the team through our normal creative process that we'll bring to it, that's the thing you can do, right? If you are like, oh man, that's an awesome design that somebody else had, but I'm really interested in the engineering side, and I want to be, and maybe I've done a bit of programming before, and I want to try to do that. Maybe you work with Kaela to do that, right?
Yep.
And that's all part of it. You mentioned earlier, Kaela, that we're going to be doing this project in Unity.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Unity for the benefit of folks who don't know?
Unity is a game-making engine. So you download Unity onto your computer, and I'm sure we'll walk you through that process. I'm sure we have some resources to get you to the latest version. You open it up, and you have a scene and game objects that you can place around. And we'll definitely go into what those are and all of the different jargon that is associated with game.
I think Kaela is breaking up a little bit.
You can.
There she comes.
Okay. Yeah, you just broke up for 2 seconds there, Kaela.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, where was I? Did you miss anything?
You were describing what it's like in Unity and the kind of things you can do.
Okay, so you open it up and there's a scene, and you can drag things around, you can code things and attach them to game objects, and you basically just have the freedom to do whatever you want and use either their library of functions and things that they have built in for you, or building it from the ground up. And it's just a playground where you can make whatever game you want to, as long as you follow their documentation and learn how to do it in that specific game engine.
I'm going to do a really obnoxious thing here, which is
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask a question like I don't know the answer to it for the benefit of our participants. I'm going to pretend like
okay.
I don't know this. So,
Mm-hmm.
Natalie, when Kaela is describing Unity, she talks about things like a scene and bringing objects into it and placing them. That doesn't sound like programming to me, and I imagine a lot of our folks who are new to game making, kind of think, well, if I'm making games, I'm programming. Do I program in Unity? Do I have to program in Unity? Is this like I'm like on the set of a movie or a play and I'm putting things in a scene? How does all of that work?
Right. It's a really good question, and I think that the mental construct a lot of folks have about anything that involves a more technical side is that at some point we open up a terminal and we just start typing, and it's like the Matrix. We're just typing and things are coming out, and then suddenly there's a game. And of course, that's not actually how it works. And what you want to imagine when you think of Unity is you have this 3D world that you can see. And there's a lot of game making that happens without ever touching code in that 3D world. So I can do things like take a cube and make that cube bigger or smaller. I can also take a custom object, for example, a ferret, and make that ferret bigger or smaller. And
you're saying ferrets are not a stock Unity object?
Alas, no. Unity does cube, cylinder, sphere,
and ferrets. Those are the basic shapes. Yeah,
of course.
Comes with that built right in there. So, I could do something like, oh, I've got a cube. I'm going to put the ferret on top of the cube. But if I want the game to do something like have the ferret move when I press a button, or have the camera look around when I move the mouse, like you would see in a first person or a third person game, then I do need to open that terminal. Real programming is a lot slower than what you see on TV, but there will be times when I program certain functionalities that I need things in the game world to do. And that's when I would sit down and start to code. There's a lot to it. There are types of programming that are very detailed and very big that support the entire game. Things like, when does the game end? What does it mean to win? Code answers that question. But there's a lot of game making that involves art. There's a lot of game making that involves moving those objects around in this 3D world. And all of these pieces are connected to each other when you put together a finished game. The final thing I'll say about that is, sometimes one person does everything. So someone like Kaela could probably write all the programming, move things around in the 3D world, and maybe even make some acceptable art. Maybe.
It's a big ask. It is not for me.
But that's exactly why we do it as a team. Because someone who's just an absolute wizard at programming might say, I need someone to make visual assets, or I need someone to write the story. And we all contribute different pieces and work in different areas of the game to make it all come together into the thing you see when you download it from itch.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for bringing that up, Natalie, because I think that's usually important on professional games. All those different roles: the creation of the art, the programming, the game design, the writing of the story, the audio design, as you mentioned earlier, right? Those are areas that even on relatively small teams are distributed across a whole bunch of people. And one of our philosophical ideas here in Endless Studios is to do a bit of that and give folks opportunities like that. If you're really interested in the programming side of this particular project, you could do that and not do design related tasks. If you're interested in both, you could do both, right? And that's kind of the approach. So you really can shape what you want to focus in on, and where your both creation and your learning and contributions as well are targeted. So Kaela, you've talked a little bit about it in Unity. We've talked about making some things, available that you described earlier to folks when they get started. And I know you've been working on the project, for a few weeks now. Can we get a little look inside of the work in progress now?
Yeah, sure. Keywords there are work in progress. This is very much the prototyping stage, and we're still figuring everything out. So there will be bugs. And bugs, if you don't know, first of all, welcome to Unity. If you've never seen Unity, hopefully you can see my screen. This is Unity. So what we're looking at right now is a scene, and you can see, oh, wow, look at that. We're in a cage. Perhaps it's because we are a ferret. And there's a bunch of objects around, and we can fly around and see them all placed. And of course, this is not how the player will interact with the game. This is just us making the game. So they're very different concepts, making the game versus playing it. The player will not be able to just fly around like this, but the player will be able, when they press play, to become this little guy. Isn't he cute? He's so precious. I love him. He's adorable. So this may or may not be the final, what we go with. This guy is not super physics-based, but he is pretty wiggly, and he's pretty textured, and he just looks really cute. We might go with a more low-poly version that's more physics-based and a lot more goofy and non-realistic looking, but that's still in progress. And yeah, let me just start playing as him. So, now we have to wait. Okay. So that was called compilation time. We have to wait for things when we're in the editor. So now we're the ferret, and the view that we see, so you can tell we are not seeing from the eyes of the ferret because we can still see the eyes of the ferret. So we have a camera that's attached to the back of us that we can move around with our mouse. And right now I'm pressing the W button to go forward, and I can press ASD as well to move in all different directions. And he's so cute as he jumps around. I love him.
He's really cute.
He's very cute. He's a little, as you say, this is obviously placeholder. He's a little bit in uncanny valley territory for me.
Yeah.
Right now, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised at the amount of jumpiness and flex you've got in the spine and stuff now already. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. He
And
looks great.
there's
Is that a trampoline?
there's a trampoline. Oh my gosh, it takes us so high.
That is the world's most. It's either the world's most powerful trampoline, or his cage is on a different planet where there's not.
Yes, or he's just the world's lightest ferret.
Possibly.
He weighs nothing. And we have these cute little balls that you can roll around, and they interact with things. This is buggy right now, but I have the idea for this puzzle right now is you see these two different little platforms here. So this one is going to spawn some extra balls. And as a player, of course, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes and how the level is supposed to play out. So you'll just come out here and be like, oh, there's some balls and some trampolines, and I'm going to play around with them. And oh, what's this? If I step on it, what happens? I wonder. Oh, a ball appeared. Wow. So once you kind of have a bunch of balls and things, which work in progress, there's a few more balls than we want right now. But
was that the bug you were referring to?
Yeah. And then eventually you should be able to kind of just push this onto this other one. And this is also buggy right now because it's jittering right now. You can see it's because it's constantly trying to move instead of stopping moving when it's going to when it's at the location it wants to be. But eventually you should be able to have this guy move upwards, and the ball will be able to stay there and do that because when you walk away from it, it'll come back down, and you need to get up here. So there's so many balls. Oh my gosh. I really want to make just like a ball pit that you can just run around in.
I was going to say you should do an Easter egg level that's a ball pit.
Yeah, you're like 70% of the way there already with
it's so cute
spawning balls. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little teaser, and hopefully by the time that we start actually implementing your own levels, you'll have this fully formed and you'll be able to reference it and come in and see how everything's placed, and you'll be able to watch a video of me playing through it to see all of the mechanics in action. And
so first of all, thank you. That was delightful. I like our little ferret. So I guess if you observations and questions about that for folks. So I use the term, placeholder, before. I'm going to do the same thing you did to me before, Natalie. What do I mean when I say placeholder?
Well, obviously, so thank you. So placeholder, obviously she's got something in there that is a good enough prototype or early version that's then later going to be replaced with whatever the final version is. So I believe you said you had a placeholder for the player controller, Kaela. Was that when you used that word?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Brian, I think, used the word.
Got it. So I know from being part of this project behind the scenes that Kaela's been doing some work, and we have one other developer on our team helping out with this to really iterate on the feel of that ferret. Mm-hmm. And the reason to use a placeholder player controller is so that, for example, if Kaela was waiting for the other developer to update the code and try something new with the physics on the ferret, Kaela can also work on the puzzle with the balls, and there's a good enough placeholder player controller that works for testing the ball spawner and the movement of the other object, so you could move that forward. And that's kind of how it works. We got to work on these different pieces, and we got to do it all together.
Yeah, and I think that it's the other issue I tie it back to is that issue of finding the fun, right? Because we don't exactly know how the ferret's going to move yet. We're not exactly sure of all the mechanics. We'll be playing around with that a lot. And so investing a lot of time and effort up front to exactly what the ferret's going to look like and exactly how he's going to animate and things like that. Not super helpful until we found that fun, and not on a small team, and on a relatively small scope project where we'd want to be spending our time. So that was the other thing that we all got a preview there of was Unity and the scene editor in Unity. And you can see it's a lot like navigating around a game, like a first person game, except you can sort of fly anywhere. And in fact, you can use, WASD to move around a Unity scene as well. Kaela, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know if you have anything prepared. Excuse me, prepared. We got to see the scene editor a little bit. Do you have some code you could show us real quickly?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Let's see. What was I working on before? Okay, so yeah, I will actually show you why the bug is occurring. That with that jittery little guy,
Cool.
it was a ramp, yeah, that was like jittering around.
Mhm.
So here, let me show you what this part looks like. So when you're working in a game, the first thing you want to do when you think of a mechanic is just get it on the screen. That's what it's called. Just get it on the screen. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to work perfectly. It just has to start somewhere. So that's kind of when I say prototyping, you're rapidly making these things that you'll probably either throw away in the long run or make so many changes to that it's not even recognizable at the end. But you need the prototype to just start thinking about, okay, I need to start making the levels. I need to give these level designers something, the placeholders that we were talking about. So yeah, this is just a very basic version. I just started working on this little movable ramp. So here you have the movable ramp, and there's a trigger behind here that controls when it's moved. So right here, this little symbol is what a script looks like, and you can see them over here. So this symbol matches right here, and that's how you know that it's a script instead of some other kind of object that Unity has inside of it. So you can just pull scripts onto these physical objects and they will attach themselves, and then you'll be able to, in this inspector window, go down and inspect them and change anything that you want to change. Like this is a 2 right now, I can make it a 1. I don't know what that's doing. I'm not going to change it, but you can just like change all of these different values.
I'll just change it. It's probably fine.
I'll just change it. Yeah, it's fine. It won't break anything.
The cage explodes.
Right.
Yeah, and then balls there'll be an infinite number of balls. No, we already had that.
So we have this little term called objects and this called object end positions. So keep those two in mind, because then we're going to go back into this script and look at that. We have objects and object end positions. So these two are public, which means that you'll be able to see them inside of this editor. And you notice that we didn't see one called object start positions. That's because it's private. And that means I don't want you to touch it, basically. If it's not exposed to you inside of this Unity editor, please don't mess with it. That's what that means. So these public things are things that you've set. And I've set the object, the rigid body, to be from this guy by dragging it on there. And I've set this end position. And it goes in, there's these different functions that are built into Unity scripts in C#, and those are just automatically called. And I'm not going to give like a whole coding lesson right now, but functions, when they're called, it just makes things happen. That's how you can think of it at a very basic level. And I don't have to manually call them because they're built into Unity. Unity knows when to call them. I don't have to worry about it. So when start goes in, they're going to fill out these. We're going to initialize this. Again, I'm sorry, I don't want to get into a whole coding lesson here, but
it's hard to resist the temptation, though, right?
I know.
You want to explain so much. I mean, my goal, Kaela, in asking you to show us some code was just to show a little bit of what was going on behind the scenes. As you mentioned, this is a programming language called C#, which is the language you program in Unity. And again, for folks watching, don't worry about the details of it. We're going to talk a lot about coding concepts. We're not going to necessarily expose to you on the test that you'll do all of the details of the underlying frameworks that Kaela is building here, so you don't have to sweat it. But a key concept, Kaela, I am glad that you showed, was that concept of you can code up the real underlying what sort of makes the car run stuff here in your scripts, and then you use the phrase expose, which is the right phrase. You can make certain settings. You can say in your script, hey, make this setting available in the Unity editor for a game designer to work with. Now that actually is a super Unity-like thing to do, and it's a super common game development workflow, because what it lets you have is a division of labor on your project. So your engineers can build and write the code for the underlying, let's say, ferret player controller, and they can say, oh, the ferret's normal move speed is 5 meters per second, but I'll make that move speed value available to the game designers. And then when a game designer is working with it, well, should it be 5 meters a second or should it be 5.1 meters per second? And they can just change that in the editor and experiment very quickly without even having to go and look at, let alone change the code. And that's super important.
Yeah.
You want to? Can you quickly describe the bug to
Yeah,
us,
yeah. I
Kaela?
was like, I promised I'd explain the bugs, so I will. Okay, so the reason that there's a bug with it jittering is because whenever you don't worry about what a trigger is, but when you enter the trigger, it sets this thing called a bool, which is just a true or false value to true. And then when you leave the trigger, it sets it to false. So you basically have an on and off state. And it instead of doing something when that on or off state goal has been completed, it's continuing to do the thing that the on or off state has done. So, like, if you were to think about this as an on and off switch on a light bulb, once you turn it on, it's going to send some information to your lights that say turn on, and then it probably will not do that anymore. But this is continuing to send turn on, turn on, turn on, turn on. So what it's doing is when it's on and you want to move towards the goal, it's moving towards that end position that you start. But instead of once it's reached that end position being like, okay, I'm good, I don't have to do that anymore, it's going to keep trying to do that. So it's just going to be like, okay, I still need to move, I still need to move, I still need to move. And vice versa, when it needs to go back down, that's when the state is off, and it's doing the same thing where it's just like, okay, I don't know if I've gotten to that end point, so I'm just going to keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. And it causes that jittery movement. So hopefully that's your first bug explained.
So yeah, making things move is important. Making them stop at the end is equally important.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, cool. So, you've talked a little bit about it before, Natalie. If participants want to get involved in this project when we start things up next week, what should they do?
I think that the best thing to do would be to start out by knowing what the schedule is for these streams. The first thing you need when you get involved in a project like this is to know what's current, what's exciting, what are people talking about, and what's happening. So before you start taking tasks, opening a code window, moving a ferret around in a cage, you should just get to know us a little bit. And there's a few different ways of getting to know us. There are these streams. We'll also be running Zoom, which is not a live broadcast, but is in fact an opportunity to get to know us a little bit more personally and ask questions. Many people by this point are pretty comfortable with Zoom, but we can assure you that if you join a Zoom with us, we will endeavor not to put you on the spot. It's up to you if you want to talk. You can also join and listen. It's very flexible depending on how social and how talkative you want to be. And then we also have the Discord community where you can chat with us and ask questions there. Any one of those ways that appeals to you, you should take advantage of, because knowing the team culture, the vibe, the energy is really going to make a difference. So once you're up to speed on the team, the next thing you should really do, I would say, is think about what kind of thing you want to contribute to the project. Are you interested in game design? Are you interested in programming, sound design? What is your level of involvement and where are your interests in a project like this? And then look to see which tasks are going to fit your interests. Now, you don't have to be an expert. You can say, oh, I want to learn coding and I've never done it before. That is okay, and you can totally take a task that involves coding. We are here to support you to learn what you need to know to make that task complete. That's part of this experience, and that is the one thing that makes it different from a regular game studio, where in real life, of course, we would try to hire an expert like Kaela to be the engineer on a project. Here, you can decide to work on an engineering task and see what it's like. Who knows if you want to be an engineer? This is where you figure that out. So bring an attitude of curiosity and exploration and openness to it. Pick things you want to work on that sound interesting to you. And then if your interest wanders somewhere else, be honest about that with yourself and say, there's no bad grade for not finishing a task. But if you're not going to finish one, just let it go. Tell us you're not going to complete it so you can move past it and try something that is going to be really fun. So we're going to give you all the details on exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it. And if you are committed to doing something and you know the timeline, the final thing people should do is be committed and deliver what you need to deliver on time. So if you take a task to do level design and you're just so excited about making a puzzle in that cage, get it to us by the end of the sprint so we can include your level in the game and have people play test it. I actually realized I didn't mention that when you asked me the question before about what are the kinds of things you can do on the project. I forgot to mention play testing is another way of participating. So if you're coming in and you're feeling a little tentative about just opening Unity for the first time, a great early, easy way to get involved in a project like this is to come in when we're in the sprint where we play test. You can download a level created by another team member, try it out, and give your thoughts, reactions, comments, try to find bugs. That is a really useful contribution to a project, and it might also help you feel a little bit more comfortable next time actually making a level of your own.
Yeah, and a super, as you say, important part of the game making process as well. You cannot get, and something that, in my experience, new game makers often aren't as sensitive to. You cannot get enough playtesting on your game. You cannot watch enough people playtest your game, as it's being built. You cannot playtest frequently enough. All of that's good, and that's part of that iterative process where you make it better and better.
Yeah. I was going to say, when we were looking at Kaela's early prototype for Feisty Ferrets there on the screen, I've taught newcomers before who would look at that and say, oh, the game looks almost done. It's like that, the level of how not done it is so extreme. We need so much help with this. We need people to make levels. We need people to play test repeatedly. And we need a kind of collective effort to take it from what you saw to an actual video game, which has so much more to it. Music, easy, medium, and hard levels. We need UI. There's so much to do. So we need you guys to do it.
And everything starts out not there, and then it gets a little, there in an early form, and then it gets a little more polished, then a little more polished, and a little more, and eventually you have something. And I think that's a theme of game making. Games do not spring fully formed from the mind of the team in a day. So we'll get there. And then the other thing I should mention, Natalie, on the folks getting involved side of it, because again, this is the first project we're kicking off under this model, and as of the time we're doing this stream, we actually haven't gotten folks into the Endless Studios platform yet, or gotten anybody set up. So we'll be reaching out next week. That's the week of June 28th, 2021, to get everybody set up, get you all in there, and get you started. So you'll be able to see the system we've built, where you'll be able to sign up for tasks, and you'll be able to submit work as you complete it on those tasks, and you'll be able to reach out to us and get help if you need it. So we're about at our time for the stream here today, guys. I am excited for this project. I'm excited that it's the first one that we're doing. I like ferrets. I think we should make a game with ferrets. There should definitely be a ball pit teaser level. I'm highly, or Easter egg level, I should say. I'm highly supportive of that.
Maybe the main menu, they just run around a ball pit.
Maybe it's just the ferrets running around the ball pit. I like that.
It reminds me of, we had a fantastic game that came through in some of our in-person programs, where someone designed a game that had all of these bunches of bananas in it. And it was also a level building assignment. And she had the song playing that was ring, 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 banana phone.
Oh, yeah.
It was so brilliant.
Thanks for bringing that up. It's going to be in my head the whole rest of the day now.
From me to you, an earworm.
So nice.
Very nice. Well, on that musical note, I think we'll sign off from the stream today. So thanks everybody for watching. We're going to do another one of these on Monday, where we will be, that's Monday the 28th, where we will be introducing our second project, which is a cyberpunk aesthetic, first person techno city stealth thievery game, which I think, yes, I'm being told that is as far away from Adorable Ferrets as one can reasonably get. So
spectrum of
it's a spectrum, yes.
It's a spectrum. Well, we're trying to appeal to different kinds of gamers and creators, and have different genres. So we'll I think it'll work.
Although I will say, it's possible to contribute to both projects,
Oh,
right,
for sure.
Brian?
Yeah. It is,
Yeah.
and just to highlight one thing you said earlier before we go, your contributions to a project are no more or no less than what you sign up for, right? So if you do a design, you say I'd like to take on a design task on Feisty Ferrets, and you find that Kaela is just such a taskmaster and such a disagreeable person to work with. You're not going to find that, but that you're like, I'm done. Well, if that was the case, then we would just ask that you complete the one task, and you don't have to do another task on that project. On the other hand, if you want to take on a task simultaneously with Dawn City, you can do that as well. It's the other game, Dawn City Heist, they're calling it.
Yeah.
And if you're like, on the other hand, I'm really into ferrets, and I really like working, on Kaela's project. Well, then you can take on as many tasks as your ambition, allows you to take on, and that'll be awesome too. So that's the plan. We'll share more details with folks next week. On Monday, if you want to tune into the stream, you'll learn more about Dawn City Heist. And Kaela and Natalie, again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time and hanging out, and looking forward to seeing the project come to fruition.
Thanks.
So exciting.
Awesome. All right. Well, take it easy, guys. I will see you all later.